No matter how you look at it, Arthur Shawcross was a troubled person. He frequently lied about what he did and went into fits of rage that led to broken windows and beaten wives. Shawcross also killed 13 people over the course of 17 years. The serial killer, also known as the Monster of the Rivers, the Genesee River Strangler, and the Genesee River Killer, was not a small man. He weighed 300 pounds and stood 6 feet tall. He could overpower people with his strength, which pretty much sums up his murder methods. Welcome back to True Stories. Join our family in exploring some of the most twisted true crime cases. As always, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Shawcross was born on June 6, 1945, and died on November 10, 2008, while serving a life sentence for the murder of 11 women. From his birthplace of Kittery, Maine, his family moved to Watertown, a small town near Lake Ontario in New York State, when he was still a child. Shawcross claims that his adolescence was turbulent and cites a difficult relationship with both parents, particularly his domineering mother, for his later troubles. He says he also exhibited behavioral problems at an early age, including bedwetting and bullying. Shawcross also made extreme reports about his early sexuality. He claimed his aunt sexually molested him when he was 9 and that he had sexual relations with his younger sister. He also admitted to his first homosexual encounter at the age of 11, which he says was followed by experimentation with bestiality. In contrast to these claims, however, his parents and siblings maintain that he had a normal childhood, and that the described events were largely the product of his imagination. There is no way of knowing whose version represents the reality of his upbringing. But what became clear later on was that Shawcross would change his stories at will, as he was interviewed by various professionals in the course of their investigations. From school records, it can be independently verified that he was an inveterate truant with a particularly low IQ, a tendency to bully and be violent, and that he came under suspicion for a series of juvenile arson attacks as well as burglaries. He dropped out of school after failing to pass the 9th grade, and the next few years were punctuated with violence and jail sentences. He received his first probationary sentence in December 1963 for smashing a shop window. Shawcross married his first wife, Sarah, in September 1964. The couple produced a son in October 1965, but another probationary charge for unlawful entry in November 1965 proved the last straw for his marriage, and he was divorced soon after. His second marriage, following his drafting into the Army in April 1967, was also tainted by violence and was equally short-lived. He served a tour of duty in the Vietnam War in October 1967, and he later claimed that he murdered and cannibalized 2 young Vietnamese girls and several children while there. However, there is no corroborating evidence to support this. He also claimed a combat kill total of 39, which, when investigated later, was also discounted as fabrication. Authorities claim he killed no one on his tour of duty. Upon his return from military duty in 1968, he landed in trouble yet again, when he was caught and convicted for an arson attack. Shawcross served 2 years of a 5-year jail term. He was released in October 1971 and returned to Watertown again. A year later, on April 7, 1972, he claimed his first victim, 10-year-old neighbor Jack Blake. Shawcross took him fishing just a few days before he disappeared, but denied any knowledge of the disappearance. Several weeks later, on April 22, 1972, he married his third wife, Penny Sherbino, who was pregnant with his child. 5 months later, his victim's body was finally located. He had been sexually assaulted and suffocated, but police had no leads to the identity of the killer. Jack Blake would be the first of many more victims. In September 1972, the body of 8-year-old Karen Ann Hill was found under a bridge. She had been assaulted and murdered. Police found mud, leaves, and other debris had been forced down her throat and inside her clothing. Neighbors remembered that Shawcross had been seen with Karen in the vicinity of the bridge before her disappearance, and he had a history of minor run-ins with local children. Shawcross came under immediate suspicion. He was arrested on October 3, 1972, and finally confessed to both killings. Although he was only charged with Karen Hill's killing, given the lack of evidence tying him to Jack Blake's death, he received a 25-year jail sentence, and his third wife, Penny, divorced him shortly thereafter. After serving less than 15 years of the sentence, he was released on parole in April 1987. The well-publicized resettlement of a child killer in the Binghamton area of New York State was greeted by a public outcry, and he was forced to leave the area after a few months, along with his new girlfriend, Rose Wally. In Rochester, Shawcross took on a succession of menial jobs. His lackluster marriage to Wally meant that he was soon seeking solace elsewhere, both from prostitutes as well as his new girlfriend, Clara Neal. It did not take long for Shawcross to return to his murderous ways. Hunters discovered his next victim, 27-year-old prostitute Dorothy Blackburn, on March 24, 1988. Her body was found in the Genesee River, dumped there, following a vicious attack that included bite marks in the groin area and strangulation. With little evidence and no public impetus to solve the murder of a prostitute, her case languished for over a year. There were other murders of prostitutes in that time, but given the danger of the profession, nothing untoward was noticed that linked any of the cases. The discovery of the body of another prostitute, Anna Stefan, on September 9, 1989, linked several of the victims. She died of asphyxia, and her body had been dumped in a similar manner to Blackburn's corpse. Her body, however, was found far from the original murder scene, so again, the possibility that a serial killer was at work was not recognized. On October 21, 1989, the body of a homeless woman, Dorothy Keeler, aged 59, was discovered, followed 6 days later by another prostitute, Patricia Ives, in the same area. Both had been asphyxiated, and the press started to show an interest as the cases were linked. They nicknamed the offender the River Killer. In all the previous cases, at least some attempted concealment had been made, which police felt indicated previous criminal or military experience. They began to advise prostitutes working in the area to exercise caution, and sought as much information as possible about strangers operating in the area. They also began checking criminal records for offenders who might be living in the immediate area. Shawcross's sealed criminal record shielded him from police scrutiny. As prostitutes continued to disappear, it became apparent that the killer must be someone familiar to the women who worked in the area. Police were able to piece together a description of a regular client called Mitch or Mike. Women said this particular John was prone to violence. With the body count mounting, the police sought assistance from FBI profilers. They divided the 11 unsolved prostitute murders into subgroups according to method and position. They developed a profile that described the killer as a white male in his 20s or 32s, who was strong, probably with a previous criminal record, familiar with the area, and comfortable enough with the victims that they would enter his vehicle without question. The lack of sexual interference indicated it might be someone with sexual dysfunction. The post-mortem injury inflicted on June Stott, and not on any other victim, indicated that the killer was becoming more comfortable around corpses, probably returning to the crime scene again later to relive the attack. The discovery of the body of Elizabeth Gibson on November 27 brought a breakthrough. Suspect Mitch had been seen with her shortly before her disappearance, but they seemed no closer to establishing his identity. Police tried various tactics, including canvassing all the local bars, to no avail. When a pair of discarded jeans was discovered near the river on December 31, 1989, containing an ID card for a girl named Felicia Stevens, police began an aerial search of the surrounding area. On January 2, 1990, a helicopter spotted what appeared to be a naked female body, lying on the ice surface of the river by a bridge in the forest. The body was not Felicia Stevens, but that of missing prostitute June Cicero. She had also been mutilated post-mortem, as well as sawn practically in half. Even more importantly, the helicopter spotted a man standing on the bridge next to a small van. He appeared to be either masturbating or urinating. Fortunately for the authorities, Shawcross had, as speculated, returned to the scene of one of his crimes to relive the pleasure of the attack. Patrol teams on the ground were alerted to the vehicle, which had sped away. They finally tracked down Shawcross via the car's registration, which was in the name of his girlfriend, Clara Neal. When approached, Shawcross agreed to assist the police with their inquiries. When they asked for his driver's license, he admitted he did not have one, and then revealed that he had been in jail for manslaughter. Police were confident they had their killer, and further questioning revealed the earlier child deaths and a grandiose account of his Vietnam War service, which was later discounted. A photo taken of him during the initial questioning soon confirmed his identity as Mitch, and official inquiries unearthed the reason for Shawcross's sealed record, which prevented the police from tracking him down sooner. In November 1990, Shawcross went on trial for the 10 murders that had occurred in Monroe County. Shawcross's defense team tried to build a case based on an insanity plea, citing various mitigating factors such as his upbringing, post-traumatic stress as a result of military service, a cyst on the brain, and a rare genetic defect. The prosecution was quick to dispute the claims about his childhood and military service, casting doubts on Shawcross's testimony during the trial. Shawcross's defense attorneys tried to say he was insane, but the court didn't agree. A judge sentenced the murderer to 250 years in prison. This time, Shawcross wasn't getting out. Arthur Shawcross died in prison in 2008 at the age of 63. He didn't waste all of his time there. The mass murderer took up painting bright visages of butterflies, wildlife, and water features. New York Governor George Pataki called Shawcross's works of art sickening because the gentle paintings didn't reveal the monster underneath. We've come to the end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Till next time.